When I was looking for a suitable cover for my book, Fighting Fit, Health, Medicine and War in the 20th Century, there was one photograph that stood out. As soon as I saw this photograph from the collections of the Australian War Memorial, I knew that this was for the cover. The photograph is of wounded soldiers being treated by the Australian 5th Field Ambulance at an advanced dressing station near Ypres on the 20th of September 1917. The image just leaps out at you. It captures the imagination, and it seems to epitomise the horror, the chaos, and the confusion of frontline medicine in the Great War. However, whilst it can be representative of medicine and of the experience of the wounded and of doctors and medical orderlies in the Great War, behind it there also lies personal stories, those of the men concerned. It was impossible not to wonder just who these people were and what stories lay behind them. So I embarked through embarkation lists, nominations for military honours, and the roll of honour of the war dead. Now, the Australian War Memorial has identified some of the people. For example, the medic whose ministrations dominate the right foreground of the photograph as he stands and bandages a patient's left arm is identified as Private Frank McCaffrey, a fencer from Claremont, Queensland. McCaffrey had joined up at the age of 18 on the 5th of October 1916 and was to receive the Military Medal in 1918 for his actions in capturing 15 German soldiers at an enemy post at Villers-Bretonneux near Amiens. And on another occasion, when his comrades were all wounded, single-handedly advancing the line. There's just one problem with this identification. Frank McCaffrey was a private with the 26th Battalion, and he had no known connection with the medical services. So, assuming that the identification was correct, there were 3 candidates, all with the same surname. All of them were members of the 5th Field Ambulance and had sailed from Sydney on HMAT Ajana on the 31st of May 1915. Henry Gerald McCaffrey is a 24-year-old draper. Alfred James McCaffrey, a 21-year-old clerk. And Richard Daniel McCaffrey, a 28-year-old plumber. This man could have been any of them. They were all brothers. Now, as luck would have it, the correct identity was furnished by the granddaughter of the man concerned. Turned out he was the 28-year-old plumber Richard Daniel McCaffrey. He survived the war and had a number of children. Now, it was really good to be able to identify him and also to find out what happened afterwards. But I think this just goes to show the dangers of accepting anything as correct on catalogues or even in original records. Misidentifications are common. Now, standing at the back of the photo and attending a head injury is 21-year-old Sergeant Cecil Walter Smith. There's a certain poignancy to his story, as he was to be shot through the head at Polygon Wood near Zonnebeck, outside Ypres, on the 25th of September 1917, only 6 days after this photograph was taken. He was out with Colonel Scott, and a Lance Corporal Miles was to stay with him until he died and was then unceremoniously buried in an unmarked grave near to where he fell. His friend A.W. Brown recorded with restraint and sorrow that this man was my mate when he wrote to his parents. Smith had embarked on HMAT or SOVA from Sydney on the 11th of March 1916. Before joining up in 1915, he had been a plumber or engineer from Abbotsford, New South Wales, and he was to sail as part of a dermatological hospital unit and had plenty of experience in the sanitary section and a stationary hospital, as well as in casualty clearing stations like this one. With all that experience behind him, his death would indeed have been a loss to the field ambulance at a time when his experience was much needed. When, after the war in 1919, his family requested a photograph of his grave, none could be found. He is commemorated on the Menin Gate at Ypres. Now in the foreground, is Private Albert Deust, a 31-year-old teacher from Inverell, New South Wales, who had joined up in the 5th Field Ambulance in April 1915 and had sailed from Sydney on HMAT Madeira in August 1915. Behind him, and only partially visible, is Basil Cecil Barwick, who is writing up the dressing station's records on a pad. Barwick was a 24-year-old buttermaker from Hinton Hunter River, Sydney. He'd sailed with the 5th Field Ambulance on HMAT Ajana in May 1915 and was to be awarded the Military Medal in 1917 with 3 of his colleagues, performing a stretcher party on the 3rd of May during the intensity of the bombardment north of Noyo. With utter disregard of danger, the stretcher party had attended the wounded and carried them away to safety in spite of the intense enemy barrage. They carried the wounded continuously for 36 hours, only stopping to attend them on the way. Barwick was later awarded a bar to the Military Medal in 1918 for saving 2 wounded men from the wreckage of an overturned artillery transport wagon, which had been shelled on the 5th of October 1918 at Tuncore during operations on the Hindenburg Line. Regardless of heavy shelling, he displayed the greatest gallantry and devotion to duty. Well, it would be interesting to know just who everyone in the photograph was, and to know something of their stories and subsequent lives. Even more anonymous are the wounded being treated in the confusion and chaos of the dressing table. All of them must have tales to tell. In fact, most of them look haunted, dazed. The boy seen next to the man with the wounded arm, being treated by a medic, working just behind McCaffrey, in particular, looks like he's come through great horrors. In fact, he almost just looks like a small boy, frightened and unable to understand what's happening to him. But only one of the wounded, the man seated behind the soldier with the sling, has been tentatively identified as Private Herbert Alfred Hunter. He was a farmer from Wagon, Western Australia, with the 5th Pioneer Battalion. He was later killed in action, aged 26. And he is buried at Beacon Cemetery, Sailly-Lorette in France. Now, there's a lot of personal heroism, a lot of history, and a lot that tells us about the medical experience in the Great War in this photograph. Finding out about these cover boys is not essential for the book I was writing, but it was something I wanted to know. After all, if these young men from Australia were to grace the cover of my book, I at least owed them the duty of finding out who they were, learning a little more about them and their fate. All of them deserve to be known.